My wife wrote my confession before she told me what I had supposedly done. It was sitting on the kitchen island when I came home. 3 printed pages. Double-spaced. A yellow sticky note on top. Read exactly. Do not improvise. I thought it was a joke. Then I saw the first line. My name is Thomas Calder. I betrayed my wife and my marriage by having an inappropriate relationship outside our home. I read it twice. Then a third time. My wife, Mayor Elena Calder of Fairmont, Wisconsin, walked into the kitchen carrying 2 phones and a folder stamped with the city seal. She had not changed out of the navy suit she wore to the afternoon press conference. Good, she said. You're home. I held up the pages. What is this? She stopped. For maybe half a second, something human crossed her face. Then the mayor came back. We need to talk. No. You need to explain why I'm confessing to an affair I didn't have. Keep your voice down. We live alone. Thomas. There it was. The warning tone. The one she used with council members who wandered off message. I put the pages on the counter. Who did I supposedly sleep with? She exhaled slowly. No one. Excellent. That simplifies the divorce. Don't do that. Do what? Turn this into a personal fight before you understand the stakes. I laughed once. It's a fake confession to adultery. I think personal arrived first. She closed her eyes. Then. Gavin's in trouble. I knew immediately which Gavin. Gavin Rusk. Chief advisor to the mayor. 37. Political strategist. Former state senate staffer. The person Elena trusted more than anyone inside City Hall. He had run her first mayoral campaign, helped build the coalition that got her elected, managed her relations with the business community, and had a talent for making messy problems disappear before they reached cameras. I had never liked him. That did not make him guilty of anything. What kind of trouble? Elena looked at the window. That told me it was bad. An investigative reporter has hotel records. Hotel records for what? A development conference in Chicago. Okay. Gavin used a city purchasing card. For the hotel? Yes. That sounds normal. He booked 2 rooms. I waited. One was assigned to a consultant named Marissa Vale. I knew the name. Vale Strategies. Public affairs contractor. Her firm had advised the city on the Riverside Convention District redevelopment. A project worth almost $300 million. Why is that a scandal? Because Marissa's firm had an active contract with the city when Gavin approved reimbursements connected to that trip. I frowned. Still not necessarily a scandal. No. Elena's fingers tightened around the folder. There are messages. What kind? She said nothing. That was answer enough. Were they sleeping together? I don't know. That means yes. I said I don't know. You're the mayor. He's your chief advisor. You usually know what he had for breakfast. Thomas. What do the messages show? She walked to the island and opened the folder. Not for me. For herself. Like she needed the paper between us. The reporter has screenshots implying Gavin and Marissa had a personal relationship during the contract period. Is that true? I haven't confirmed it. Did Gavin deny it? He said the messages are being taken out of context. That is not a denial. He said nothing improper affected procurement. That is also not a denial. Elena's jaw tightened. I knew that expression. She wanted me to stop asking questions that forced precise answers. So where do I come in? She looked at the confession. The reporter's story is scheduled for tomorrow morning. And you want me to admit an affair tonight? Yes. I stared at her. For the first time, the plan became visible. Not logical. Visible. You want to create a bigger personal scandal. I want to control the news cycle. With my reputation. With our marriage. Our marriage? Her voice became more urgent. The reporter already has photos of us arriving separately at events over the last 6 months. She's been asking whether we're having problems. We are having problems. I know. Because you've been living at City Hall. I know. Because Gavin calls you at midnight. I know. And your solution is to make America think I cheated on you. Fairmont is not America. Comforting. She ignored that. If we release a statement tonight, the morning coverage changes. To what? Mayor Calder's husband admits affair. Questions about whether private marital strain affected the administration. We control the timing. I stared at her. And Gavin? The reporter's piece still runs. But buried. Competed with. Buried. She said nothing. I walked away from the island. It was such a political plan that I could almost admire it. Take a complicated public integrity story. Replace it with simple sex. People understand cheating. They argue about cheating. They click cheating. Procurement rules, consulting contracts, purchasing cards, disclosure requirements. Boring. My fake affair could buy Gavin 48 hours. Maybe enough for Elena's communications team to define his scandal as personal indiscretion rather than public corruption. You already discussed this with him. Elena did not answer. You did. Yes. When? This afternoon. With Gavin? And communications. Who else knows? Lydia. Nathan. City Council knows we're preparing a personal statement but not the details. Lydia Fenn was Elena's communications director. Nathan Shaw was her deputy chief of staff. I felt something cold in my stomach. A room full of people had discussed my imaginary affair before anyone asked me. Did anybody say this was insane? Elena. Did anyone say fabricating a spouse's affair could become its own scandal? We are not fabricating government records. No. Just my life. It would be a personal statement. Written by whom? Communications drafted it. Of course. Using city employees? Her face changed. There. She had not expected that question. Lydia was helping me as mayor. With a statement about my fake sex life? Thomas, don't reduce this. I'm trying to understand exactly how many public employees were paid today to plan my humiliation. That is not fair. Is it wrong? She turned away. I knew enough about municipal government to recognize the danger. Not because I was a lawyer. I was an accountant. For 11 years, I had worked in forensic accounting and internal controls, mostly for insurance companies and regional manufacturers. The most useful thing my career taught me was that bad decisions almost always sound reasonable in a room where everyone wants the same outcome. Elena wanted to protect her administration. Gavin wanted to survive. Communications wanted a controllable story. Nobody in that room needed my fake affair to be good for me. So no one noticed I was the cost. I picked up the confession again. Page 2 was worse. Elena has shown extraordinary grace during a painful period in our marriage. Any suggestion that her administration's recent challenges are connected to her personal conduct is false. I alone am responsible for the difficulties in our home. I looked at her. You want me to say your administration's problems have nothing to do with you? That line protects against speculation. It protects you. Yes. And Gavin. It is not about Gavin. Everything tonight is about Gavin. She came closer. Thomas, listen to me. I am. If this story lands cleanly tomorrow, council members panic. Donors panic. The redevelopment vote next week becomes impossible. So 3 years of work can collapse because Gavin may have had an inappropriate relationship. Not if that's all he did. She looked away again. My stomach dropped. What else? Nothing proven. Elena. Nothing proven. What are you not telling me? She pressed both palms against the counter. The reporter is asking whether Marissa got internal information before her firm's contract amendment. There it was. Not sex. Access. What internal information? Budget ranges. Before the amendment negotiation? Yes. Did Gavin have them? Yes. Did she? We don't know. Messages? One references a number. What number? She did not answer. Elena. 4.8. That meant something to her. Not me. What is 4.8? The maximum contingency amount staff had modeled for the contract amendment. And Marissa mentioned it before negotiations? In a text. To Gavin? Yes. My mouth went dry. Did he give it to her? He says no. Then how did she know? He says the number was discussed informally in the development community. Was it public? No. Now the fake affair made sense. This was not merely hiding that Gavin had slept with a consultant. It was buying time around a potential leak of confidential negotiating information. I dropped the pages. No. Elena went still. What? I'm not doing it. You haven't even heard the full plan. I've heard enough. Thomas. No. This could destroy me. That was the first honest sentence of the night. Not Gavin. Not the city. Her. I looked at my wife. You're asking me to publicly destroy my own name to give your advisor cover. I'm asking my husband to help me survive a political attack. By lying. About us. That doesn't make it harmless. We can correct the record later. I laughed. You want to retract adultery? After the immediate crisis. What do I say? Sorry, voters, I never cheated. My wife just needed a better headline. She flinched. Then her voice hardened. Do you understand what happens if Gavin goes down tomorrow? That depends on what he did. He takes the redevelopment coalition with him. No. Yes. Elena, if your coalition depends on one advisor surviving an ethics scandal, that is not a coalition. You don't understand politics. No. I stepped closer. But I understand evidence. That stopped her. Let the reporter publish. You think that's easy because it isn't your career. No. I think the facts should decide what happens to your career. Her face changed. That's cruel. No. What would you call refusing to help your wife when one statement could keep this administration alive? Refusing to confess to something I didn't do. You know what people will say tomorrow. Then let them. You'll let them tear me apart? If the story is false, fight it. And if parts are true? She did not answer. There was the entire marriage. For years, Elena had said she loved that I was the one person who told her no. Somewhere after winning office, she started loving it less. Gavin never said no. He found angles. Managed headlines. Moved people. Made bad facts negotiable. I had become the inconvenient person at home asking whether the facts should be changed at all. Elena picked up the confession. Press is outside at 8. What? We scheduled a statement. You scheduled my confession? We needed to be ready. You told them I agreed? I said we were discussing it. No. Thomas. No. She stared at me for a long time. Then something in her expression changed. Not anger. Calculation. If you refuse tonight, the press will ask why you were expected to speak. That's your problem. They'll know there's a story. There is. You could make this so much worse. I'm not the one who created it. She whispered. You are my husband. Yes. I need you. I almost broke. Not because of politics. Because I remembered Elena before City Hall. The woman who sat with me on the floor of our first apartment eating takeout because we could not afford a dining table. The woman who cried the night she won her first council race because she thought people had trusted her with something sacred. The woman who once told me, if I ever start believing the office belongs to me, remind me it belongs to them. I wondered when she had forgotten. Then her personal phone buzzed. Gavin. She looked at the screen. I saw his name. She answered. Not now. Pause. No. He hasn't agreed. Another pause. Her eyes flicked toward me. Gavin, I said not now. She hung up. I held out my hand. Give me the phone. What? Your phone. No. Then ask him one question. Her face tightened. What? Ask him whether he gave Marissa the 4.8 number. I already did. What did he say? No. Ask him whether he knows how she got it. Silence. Elena. He said he had a theory. What theory? She may have seen a draft on his desk. I stared at her. In his office? Yes. Why was a city contractor alone in his office? She wasn't alone. You were there? No. Who was? He says staff were in and out. I laughed without humor. So your defense is that the consultant he may have been sleeping with possibly saw confidential negotiating information sitting unsecured on his desk. Stop saying may have been sleeping with. He won't deny it. She looked away. That was when I knew the problem was bigger than anything she had admitted. Not because Gavin had necessarily committed a crime. Because Elena was willing to gamble my reputation before she even knew the truth about his conduct. I walked upstairs. She followed. Where are you going? To pack. Her footsteps stopped. What? I'm staying at the Madison Hotel tonight. You're leaving? For tonight. Thomas, the press. Cancel it. We can't. You can. What do I tell them? The truth. Which truth? That your husband refused to confess to an affair he didn't have. She stared at me. You would actually say that? If someone asks. Her face went white. Not because our marriage was ending. Because she understood what that sentence would do politically. A mayor preparing a false personal scandal to shield her advisor. That was worse than the original story. I packed one bag. Before I left, I did one thing. Not a report. Not an anonymous tip. Not a mass email. One message. I sent it to Council President Miriam Sloan. She and Elena had been allies for 6 years. She was also chair of the city's oversight committee. The message said, "Miriam, Elena's staff drafted a false statement tonight for me to confess to an affair I did not have, apparently to divert coverage from questions involving Gavin Rusk and the Vail contract. I will not participate. I am preserving the draft. You should ask City Council tonight whether public resources were used to create it before anyone destroys or edits anything." I attached one photograph. The first page. Sticky note visible. Read exactly. Do not improvise. Then I turned off my phone. At the time, I thought I had protected myself. What I did not know was that Miriam was already in City Hall with the city attorney, 2 council members, and the reporter's document request sitting open on the conference table. My message did not start the scandal. It connected 2 scandals that Elena's team had been desperately trying to keep separate. The advisor's conduct. And the mayor's attempt to manufacture a lie to hide it. By midnight, the city attorney had issued a preservation notice across the mayor's office. By morning, 3 council allies had cancelled appearances with Elena. And before the day was over, the political career my wife had spent 15 years building would stop being about whether Gavin Rusk survived. It would become about why Mayor Elena Calder had been willing to invent her husband's affair to help him. At 7:12 the next morning, I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls. 17 text messages. 9 voicemails. 3 from Elena. 5 from Lydia Fenn. 2 from reporters. 1 from Council President Miriam Sloan. And 7 from numbers I did not recognize. The first message I opened was Miriam's. "Do not delete anything. Do not forward the draft to media. Call me before you speak publicly." The second came 12 minutes later. "City Council has preserved Mayor's office email, Teams, shared drives, and official mobile backups. Your message was timely." Then, "The 8 o'clock press availability has been cancelled." That was the first consequence. Not Elena losing office. Not anyone getting arrested. A press conference that had been designed around my fake confession simply disappeared from the city schedule. The official explanation was, "Mayor Calder is addressing an urgent administrative matter and will reschedule media availability." Everyone in Fairmont understood what that meant. Something had gone wrong. I was still sitting on the edge of the hotel bed when Elena called again. This time I answered. "What did you do?" No greeting. No hesitation. Her voice sounded different. Not angry. Controlled. That was worse. I protected myself. "You texted Miriam." "Yes. You attached the statement. 1 page. Do you understand what that triggered? A preservation notice." She went silent. "So she knew." I continued. "You were going to put me in front of cameras and make me confess to adultery. We were not going to force you. You scheduled the press. We expected you to understand what was at stake. No. You expected pressure to become consent." Her breathing sharpened. "Thomas, City Council has locked half my office out of shared files. That sounds temporary. Lydia is being interviewed." "About what? Who drafted the statement? Who did?" Silence. "Elena. Lydia started it." "Started what?" "The first draft. On city time?" "I don't know." "You know." "No, I don't." I could hear footsteps on her side of the call. Then a door shut. She lowered her voice. "Gavin says you've made this look like obstruction." That sentence almost made me laugh. "Gavin says?" "Yes. The man whose scandal I was supposed to absorb. This is not helping." "Good." She went quiet. Then, "You think one text gives you moral superiority. No. You think because Miriam likes you. Miriam barely knows me. She trusts you. She trusts documents." That stopped her. I got dressed. By 8:30, I was in a conference room at the offices of Hart Bell, the law firm I used for business matters. My attorney, Colin Price, had already read the draft confession. He took off his glasses. "This is political malpractice. Legal? Not necessarily by itself. Meaning? A spouse asking another spouse to lie publicly is ugly. It isn't automatically a crime. What about staff drafting it? That depends. On? Whose time? Whose devices? Why? Whether it was purely political, city business, or both. Whether public resources were used to influence a private scandal. Whether anyone altered records after the fact." I nodded. And Gavin? Different problem. Possible contract leak. Potentially much worse if the facts support it. He tapped the document. But do not assume this statement is the biggest issue. I don't. Good. Then he looked at me. Do you want to destroy your wife? No. Do you want to save her? I hesitated. No. That was slower. I want the truth to land where it belongs. That is a cleaner goal. Then he gave me instructions. Do not talk to the reporter yet. Do not speculate about Gavin. Do not accuse Elena of corruption. Do not publish the draft online. Preserve everything. Answer only factual questions from city council or an authorized investigator. That was fine with me. I had no interest in becoming the main character of Elena's scandal. The problem was that by 10 o'clock, somebody else had made me one anyway. The first headline appeared on the Fairmont Ledger website. Mayor cancels press event as council seeks records in Rusk contract controversy. At 10:18, another. City council orders record preservation in mayor's office. At 10:41. Calder advisor placed on paid leave. That one mattered. Gavin had been removed from daily access pending review. Not fired. Paid administrative leave. Standard enough. Then, at 11:06, the story changed. The Ledger published a second article. This one cited two sources familiar with the mayor's communications planning. It said Elena's office had prepared a statement concerning marital misconduct by the mayor's husband shortly before the press event was cancelled. My stomach dropped. Someone inside City Hall had leaked the existence of the confession. I called Miriam. She answered immediately. That wasn't me. I didn't think it was. City Council is furious. Who knew? Too many people. Lydia? Yes. Nathan? Yes. Gavin? Apparently. Elena? Obviously. Anyone else? 2 communications staffers were asked to prepare media monitoring. There it was. The circle had widened before I ever saw the paper. Miriam said, Thomas, they're going to ask you whether the affair was real. I'll answer. Carefully. It wasn't real. That part is simple. Then why carefully? Because the moment you say the mayor's office invented it, every camera in the state turns toward you. They already will. Probably. I leaned back. What happens now? Council meets at 2. Public? Emergency closed session first. Public statement after. About Elena? About document preservation, Rusk's leave, and an outside ethics review. Outside? We're bringing in former state ethics counsel. That was smart. The city investigating itself would be political poison. Then Miriam added. Elena wants to address council personally. Let her. You sound detached. I'm trying. At 12:30, Elena released a written statement. Not about me. Not about Gavin's innocence. 1 paragraph. I support a full and independent review of questions concerning advisor conduct, city contracting, and communications activity in my office. I have directed staff to preserve all relevant records and will cooperate fully. Good statement. Too late to solve the real problem. At 1:14, Lydia Fenn called me. I almost ignored it. Then answered. Thomas. She sounded like she had not slept. Lydia. I need to apologize. For what part? Drafting it. That surprised me. Elena told me communications drafted it. She asked for options. What kind of options? A personal diversion. There was the phrase. Not marital statement. Not family response. Diversion. Her word? No. Whose? Mine, she implied with silence. I waited. Then Lydia said. She asked what story could dominate morning coverage without forcing her to defend Gavin before we knew what the reporter had. And you suggested my affair. No. Then who did? Another pause. Gavin. I stood. What? He said the press had already been asking whether you two were separated. My grip tightened around the phone. And? He said if you admitted an affair, Elena could become the injured spouse instead of the mayor defending a compromised advisor. There it was. The actual strategy. Not just burying Gavin. Recasting Elena. From official responsible for her chief advisor. To betrayed wife. Sympathy instead of scrutiny. Did Elena agree immediately? No. That mattered. How long? 20 minutes. What changed? Gavin showed her projected social engagement. I almost laughed. Projected engagement? He had our media contractor model likely pickup. So he ran analytics on my fake adultery. Yes. I walked to the window. What did you say? I said it was reckless. Finally. But I still wrote the draft. Why? Because she told me to. There it was. The oldest defense in politics. Not illegal orders. Just momentum. What exactly were you told? To prepare a statement from you admitting marital misconduct and taking responsibility for household strain. Did you know it was false? Lydia became quiet. Yes. That was the sentence that mattered. Not because it ended anyone's career. Because now I knew the communications director had been asked to knowingly prepare a false public narrative. Why are you telling me this? Because they're interviewing me in 20 minutes. Then tell them. I will. Everything. Yes. No deleting messages. I haven't. Good. She started crying. I should have refused. Yes. I thought it was just politics. That phrase is why people end up in depositions. She actually laughed through tears. Then. Thomas, there's something else. Of course there was. What? The statement wasn't supposed to be temporary. I stopped. What do you mean? Gavin's plan was to keep it alive until after the redevelopment vote. I felt cold. Then what? Quietly announce you two were working through private issues. No retraction? No. So I would stay the adulterous husband indefinitely. Lydia said nothing. And Elena agreed? I don't know if she got that far. That is not an answer. She agreed to the initial statement. That was enough. At 2 o'clock, the city council met in emergency session. I watched the public portion from Colin's office. Miriam sat at the center of the dais. Elena sat at the mayor's position. Gavin's chair behind her was empty. The room was full. Reporters along one wall. Residents in the gallery. City employees standing near the doors. Miriam spoke first. Today's action is not a finding of wrongdoing. Good. We are preserving records and appointing independent counsel to determine facts. Also good. Then she announced 3 measures. Gavin remained on administrative leave. All procurement activity connected to Vale Strategies and the Riverside redevelopment would be temporarily reviewed before new approvals. And the council authorized outside counsel to examine whether public resources had been used to create or disseminate knowingly false political messaging. That last one landed hard. Elena's face barely moved. Then public questions began. A reporter asked. Mayor Calder, did your office prepare a statement saying your husband had an affair? Elena looked toward city council. He did not rescue her. She leaned toward the microphone. A draft personal statement was prepared. Was it true? Silence. The entire room seemed to lean forward. No, Elena said. There it was. I stopped breathing. The reporter followed immediately. Then why was it prepared? Elena looked directly into the cameras. I made a serious error in judgment while trying to respond to an unfolding crisis. No spin. No blaming me. Not yet. Did your husband agree to lie? No. Did he refuse? Yes. Did he threaten to expose you? No. That surprised me. She could have framed my message to Miriam as a threat. She didn't. Another reporter. Was the false statement intended to distract from questions involving Mr. Rusk? Elena hesitated. City council leaned toward her. Whispered something. She answered. That is part of what the independent review will determine. Politically weak. Legally smarter. Then someone asked the question I knew would come. Do you still have confidence in Gavin Rusk? Elena stared at the empty chair behind her. For years, Gavin had been the answer to every crisis. Now any answer could trap her. Yes, made her look compromised. No, meant abandoning the man she tried to protect with my reputation. Finally she said. I have confidence in the review process. That meant no. Gavin knew it too. At 3:27, his attorney issued a statement saying Gavin had acted within his authority and had never requested that any person make a false statement. I read that sentence 3 times. Then called Lydia back. Did Gavin ask for the affair strategy? Yes. Directly? Yes. Written? Silence. My stomach tightened. Lydia. There's a message. There it was. What does it say? I can't send it to you. Good. But city council has it. What does it say? She breathed out. Then paraphrased. Gavin had written in the communications group chat. If Thomas owns the marriage story tonight, Elena becomes the spouse people sympathize with. We only need 36 to 48 hours for the Rusk/Vale piece to cool and get through redevelopment vote. The message did not admit contract misconduct. It did something politically devastating. It showed the fake affair plan had been discussed as a deliberate diversion. And Elena had replied. Not with no. Not with stop. With draft options. Keep it personal, not governmental. That sentence was worse than the confession. Because it showed she understood there was a line. She just thought labeling the lie, personal, would keep it on the safe side. At 4:02, Miriam called me again. You need to know something before the news gets it. What? 2 council members who were backing Elena's State Senate Exploratory Committee withdrew their endorsements. I sat down. Elena had not formally announced. But everyone knew she was preparing to run the following year. Mayor was supposed to be the launchpad. What about her office? She is still mayor. Recall? Too early. Resignation? No indication. Council action? Not tonight. So one message had not ended her career. Not literally. What it had done was destroy the future version of it. The Senate path. The clean reformer image. The woman whose political strength came from saying she was different from machine politics. By 6, 3 major donors paused support for her exploratory committee. By 7, the state party chair said publicly that all future discussions are on hold pending facts. At 7:40, Elena texted me. Not called. One line. You were right not to read the statement. I stared at it. Then another message arrived. I was wrong to ask. I did not answer. Not because I wanted her to suffer. Because the part one needed answered was no longer between us. Why had a mayor who built her career on integrity allowed one advisor to convince her that truth was just another variable in message strategy? That answer would not come from a marriage conversation. It would come from what happened next. And by the end of the day, the city had found something on Gavin's office calendar that made the fake affair look almost secondary. 3 private meetings with Marissa Vale. None disclosed on the official project calendar. One of them occurred the night before her firm submitted the contract amendment proposal containing the exact $4.8 million contingency figure that had never been publicly released. The scandal was no longer about whether Gavin and Marissa had slept together. It was about whether someone inside the mayor's office had given a contractor a negotiating number before the city sat down at the table. And for the first time, Elena could no longer protect Gavin by changing the subject. Because I had refused to become the subject. The Riverside redevelopment vote was supposed to happen on Tuesday night. By Friday morning, nobody knew whether it would happen at all. That mattered because the fake affair had never been the real objective. The objective was Tuesday. 48 hours. That was what Gavin had written. We only need 36 to 48 hours for the Rusk/Vale piece to cool and get through redevelopment vote. Once I understood that, the whole plan looked different. Elena had not been trying to save Gavin forever. She had been trying to keep the administration standing long enough to pass one decision. After the vote, the political cost of firing him would have been manageable. Before the vote, his scandal could kill the project. That raised an obvious question. Why was Tuesday so important? The Riverside Convention District had been Elena's signature project. 3 years earlier, the East Riverfront had been a half-empty stretch of warehouses, parking lots, and an obsolete municipal garage. Elena built her first re-election campaign around changing that. Convention center. Hotel. Public river walk. Mixed-use housing. Transit improvements. Private investment wrapped around city infrastructure. Supporters called it the biggest economic project in Fairmont in 30 years. Opponents called it a taxpayer-backed gift to developers. Both were partly right. The city had already spent millions on land assembly and planning. Tuesday's council vote authorized the final development agreement and an additional contingency reserve. If it failed, the private development consortium could walk. If it passed, unwinding the deal later would become much harder. That was why Gavin needed 48 hours. Not because headlines disappear in 48 hours. Because contracts can become facts. Council President Miriam Sloan postponed the vote Friday afternoon. Not cancelled. Postponed. She issued a statement. The council will not take final action on the Riverside Development Agreement until questions regarding the integrity of the negotiation process have been independently reviewed. Elena opposed the delay. Publicly. That surprised me. I expected her to retreat once the scandal expanded. Instead, she went on local television Friday evening and argued the project should not be punished for questions involving individual staff conduct. On the narrow point, she had an argument. If Gavin acted improperly, that did not automatically mean a $300 million development was corrupt. Hundreds of people had worked on it. City planners, bond attorneys, engineers, developers, economic consultants, state transportation officials, union representatives. Killing the entire project because one advisor may have leaked one number could be reckless. But then the interviewer asked, Mayor Calder, why did Mr. Rusk say he needed the story involving your husband to hold for 48 hours specifically to get through the Riverside vote? Elena's expression changed. I can't speak to Mr. Rusk's private reasoning. You replied to that message. I replied asking communications staff to draft options. Did you understand he wanted your husband's false affair confession to help pass Riverside? Pause. I understood that he believed the administration needed breathing room. That wasn't the question. For the first time in years, I watched Elena lose control of an interview. Not dramatically. She just stopped having clean answers. And Elena had built her entire political identity on clean answers. The interviewer repeated. Did you understand that the false statement was intended to help your administration reach the Riverside vote before the Rusk story damaged support? Elena finally said. Yes. One word. Nothing collapsed immediately. But I knew her well enough to understand what it cost. She had just admitted the fake confession was not merely an attempt to protect her marriage from speculation. It had a governmental objective. Protect the administration long enough to pass a major city agreement. That made the use of city communications staff much harder to dismiss as a personal matter. Monday morning, outside Ethics Council opened formal interviews. The lead attorney was Margaret Wynne, a former deputy state ethics administrator. She was 70, precise, and apparently immune to political charm. She interviewed me for 90 minutes. Unlike the first conversations, she barely cared how betrayed I felt. Good. She wanted dates. Who first showed me the statement? Elena. Where? Our house. Who drafted it? According to Lydia, city communications staff. Did I ever authorize staff to discuss my private life? No. Had I ever told anyone in the mayor's office that I had an affair? No. Had Elena ever asked me to pretend to have one before that night? No. Did I know about the $4.8 million number before Elena told me? No. Did I have any financial interest in Riverside? That question caught me. No. Directly or indirectly? No. Your accounting firm? I'm not an owner. And we've never worked for the city or the development consortium. Any clients connected to Vail Strategies? Not that I'm aware of. She nodded. Then asked. Why did you message Council President Sloan instead of the press? Because I wanted the records preserved. Why did you think they might not be? I hesitated. Careful. I didn't know they would be destroyed. That was not my question. I thought once Elena's office realized I wouldn't participate, the draft might be edited, discarded, or recharacterized. Why? Because that is what communications people do with drafts. Margaret almost smiled. Fair. Then she asked. Why Sloan? She chaired oversight. Not because she was politically opposed to your wife? She was an ally. At the time. Yes. That answer mattered. I had not sent the message to Elena's loudest enemy. I sent it to the person institutionally positioned to ask whether government resources had been misused. Margaret closed one folder and opened another. Mr. Calder, have you seen Mr. Rusk's message about 48 hours? Only the portion described to me. Do you understand what the project vote involved? Broadly. You're a forensic accountant. Yes. Could the $4.8 million figure have affected Vail Strategies financially? That was not something I could answer casually. What was Vail's compensation structure? She slid a public contract summary across the table. Vail Strategies was not the developer. It was the city's outside public affairs and stakeholder consultant. Fixed monthly fee. Plus approved project expenses. So the contingency figure did not directly determine Vail's fee. No obvious direct benefit from the number itself, I said. Could it benefit others? Anyone negotiating against the city could benefit from knowing the city's internal ceiling. That is what our procurement expert said. Then why ask me? I wanted to know whether you'd pretend otherwise because this involves your wife. I looked at her. Apparently not. No. She closed the folder. Good. That was the end of my role. I did not join the investigation. Did not start tracing invoices. Did not magically discover corruption because I happened to be an accountant. That would have been satisfying. It also would have made no sense. The city had auditors for that. Outside counsel had subpoena power under the council resolution. The district attorney could get warrants if the evidence justified it. My job was to stay out of their way. Elena had more difficulty doing that. On Tuesday, the night the Riverside vote should have occurred, she called an alternative event at City Hall. A public town hall. She wanted the project discussed separately from Gavin. Politically, it was smart. Personally, I thought it was the first move she had made all week that sounded like the woman I married. She stood in front of almost 200 residents and took questions for 2 hours. No prepared teleprompter. No Gavin. No fake scandal. A union representative asked whether construction jobs would disappear if Riverside failed. Elena answered yes, potentially. A neighborhood activist asked why residents should trust negotiations if confidential numbers may have leaked. Elena said they should not trust them until independent review established whether the process remained fair. A taxpayer asked whether she would support rebidding portions of the deal if necessary. She paused. Then said, yes. That answer could destroy her signature project. She gave it anyway. I watched from the hotel. For a few minutes, I remembered why people elected her. Then a woman in the third row stood. Local news later identified her as Sandra Bell, a retired teacher. She asked, Mayor, if the project needed 48 hours so badly, why was your husband the one asked to pay for those hours? The room went completely silent. Elena gripped the podium. No political answer existed. Sandra continued. Why should we trust you to protect the public when you were willing to lie about the person closest to you because the truth was inconvenient? That was not an ethics law question. It was worse. It was a character question. Elena looked down. Then said, you shouldn't trust me simply because I ask you to. No one moved. You should judge what I did. Her voice shook. I asked my husband to make a false statement because I was afraid a public crisis would destroy work I believed was important. She swallowed. That was wrong. No explanation. No Gavin made me do it. No marriage language. No, mistakes were made. I cannot ask residents to distinguish truth from political convenience if I was willing to blur that distinction myself. That clip went statewide before midnight. Strangely, it helped her. Not enough to restore what she had lost. But enough that people began separating Elena from Gavin again. Her approval numbers stopped collapsing. Council members who had demanded immediate resignation softened to wait for the review. For the first time, resignation was not inevitable. Then Gavin made his move. Wednesday morning, through his attorney, he released selected screenshots of his private messages with Elena. The obvious purpose was to prove she knew more about the Vale relationship than she had publicly admitted. One message from 6 months earlier read, Marissa is becoming a complication. I should probably step back from anything touching Vale. Elena replied, do it quietly. I don't need opposition turning your dating life into a contracting story. That was bad. Very bad. Not because it proved contract favoritism. Because it showed Elena knew Gavin and Marissa had a personal relationship at least 6 months earlier. She had told the public 2 days ago that she had not confirmed whether they were involved. Technically, perhaps she meant she had not confirmed the relationship continued. Politically, nobody cared about that distinction. The Ledger headline appeared before lunch. Messages show Mayor knew of Rusk-Vale relationship months before contract questions. I called Elena. Not because I planned to comfort her. Because I wanted to hear whether the screenshot was real. She answered quietly. Yes. You knew. I knew they were dating. And you told me you didn't know whether they were sleeping together. I didn't. I almost hung up. Elena. I'm serious. You knew they were dating. Yes. And you chose that wording. Yes. That was deceptive. Yes. No fight. That was somehow worse. Why didn't you disclose the relationship? Gavin told me it had ended before Vale's amendment negotiations. Did it? He said it did. You believed him? Yes. Did you verify? No. Did you make him file a conflict disclosure? Silence. Elena. No. Why? Because he told me it was over. I closed my eyes. There it was. The failure underneath everything. Not one affair. Not one leak. Not one fake confession. Trust. Elena had built an administration where Gavin's word often ended the question. If you knew they had dated, I said, why wasn't he recused anyway? He was not the procurement officer. But he had internal budget information. Yes. He attended redevelopment strategy meetings. Yes. He had direct access to you. Yes. And Marissa's firm was under contract. Yes. Then what exactly did it ended solve? Nothing. She knew it. I made the wrong call. That phrase is getting crowded. I know. Then she whispered. He says I'm trying to sacrifice him. Are you? No. Then let the review decide. He is threatening to release everything. Everything what? Messages. Yours? Ours. Then let him. You don't understand how political conversations look when you pull lines out of context. No. I sat on the edge of the hotel desk. But I understand that you can't ask everyone else to trust context after you tried to invent mine. Silence. That hit. Finally. I know. The city's outside review reached a critical fact Thursday afternoon. The $4.8 million figure had not come from Gavin alone. 14 people had access to the internal budget model. That weakened any simple claim that he leaked it. But investigators found something else. The night before Vale's contract amendment was submitted, Gavin had met Marissa at a private dining room in the Franklin Hotel. No city employee attended. The dinner was paid with Gavin's personal credit card. Not public funds. Again, no automatic offense. Then investigators recovered a calendar attachment Gavin had forwarded to his personal email earlier that same day. Attached to the invite was a draft Riverside financial summary. The internal version. Containing the $4.8 million ceiling. Now the investigation had a transmission route. Not proof he sent it to Marissa. But opportunity. The district attorney's public integrity unit requested copies of the preserved records. That changed everything. Administrative review had become potential criminal review. Elena immediately recused herself from all remaining Riverside decisions and delegated project authority to the city administrator. That was the right move. 6 months too late. Then Miriam called me. There's going to be a council vote tonight. Riverside? No. What? Censure. I stood. Of Elena? Yes. For the fake statement? For directing city staff to develop a knowingly false personal narrative connected to an official policy objective, plus failure to disclose Gavin's conflict after she knew of his relationship. Can they remove her? No. Not through censure. So symbolic. Political, not meaningless. Is she resigning? I don't know. At 7 that night, the council chamber was full again. The censure passed 8-1. Miriam voted yes. Elena sat through the entire thing. Then, after the vote, she requested the microphone. I expected resignation. She did not give it. Instead she said, I will not resign tonight. The gallery erupted. She waited. Then, if independent findings establish that I knowingly allowed confidential negotiating information to be shared, covered up criminal conduct, or obstructed this review, I will leave office. A pause. But I will not abandon the city simply because leaving would be easier than staying here and answering for what I actually did. That was either courage or political survival instinct. With Elena, it was probably both. Then she did something Gavin never expected. She announced she was withdrawing permanently from the state senate race. Not suspending. Not pausing. Ending it. My ambition for another office influenced my fear of what this scandal would cost. Her voice shook. That fear contributed to the worst political judgment of my career. There it was. The future gone. Not because my one message magically removed her. Because once records were preserved, the lie could no longer remain a private strategy session. The mayor's office was still hers. The next election was still 18 months away. Her career had not literally ended. But the ladder she had spent 15 years climbing had stopped. And the person most furious about that was not Elena. It was Gavin. At 11:18 that night, he sent her one final text before his attorney instructed him to stop direct contact. Elena forwarded it to outside counsel immediately. I learned the wording later. You're burning both of us to save Thomas, when he's the one who blew this up. Elena replied only once. Thomas did not create the records. We did. Then she blocked him. That message did not save her career. But it was the first sign that she had finally stopped treating the truth as something Gavin could manage for her. Gavin tried to save Elena on Friday morning. The price was me. Not my reputation this time. My credibility. At 8:22, Elena's attorney received a proposed statement from Gavin Rusk's lawyer. 4 paragraphs. If Elena signed it, Gavin would publicly confirm that she had never received confidential Riverside information from him and had never directed him to favor Vail Strategies. In exchange, Elena would say the fake affair plan had originated with an overzealous communications response during a chaotic evening. She would also say I had misunderstood a preliminary draft and contacted Council President Miriam Sloan before Elena had personally approved any final statement. Technically clever. Politically useful. And false. Elena called me at 8:41. Gavin offered a deal. What kind? She read it. I listened. When she finished, I said, "That saves you." "It might. Are you signing?" "No. Immediate." That surprised me. "Why not?" "Because I approved the draft process." "Yes. I put the paper on our kitchen counter." "Yes. I asked you to read it." "Yes. And I told Lydia to prepare options after Gavin explained exactly what the diversion was supposed to accomplish." "Yes." She exhaled. "I'm not going to turn around now and say everyone misunderstood me. That was different from the Elena of a week earlier. Not redeemed. Different. What does your lawyer think?" "That Gavin is scared." "Of what?" "I don't know yet." That answer arrived less than an hour later. Marissa Vail had started cooperating. Not because she suddenly discovered civic virtue. Because outside counsel had obtained enough records that her own attorney apparently decided silence was becoming more dangerous than disclosure. At 9:37, the Fairmont Ledger reported that Vail Strategies had turned over company phones, billing files, and communications related to Riverside. By 11, Gavin's lawyer issued a statement accusing the city of criminalizing normal policy advocacy. At noon, Marissa's attorney said his client would provide a complete factual account. Everyone understood what that meant. Somebody was about to stop protecting somebody. I spent that morning at work. Actual work. An insurance fraud case involving a manufacturing warehouse outside Green Bay. For 2 hours, I traced purchase orders for industrial compressors while half the state tried to decide whether my marriage was evidence in a municipal corruption scandal. It was strangely calming. Numbers did not care who was mayor. At 12:46, Colin stepped into my office. "You should see this." He put his tablet on my desk. The Ledger had posted another update. Vail attorney, consultant received confidential Riverside figure from Rusk during private dinner. I read the headline twice. Then the article. Marissa admitted Gavin had shown her part of an internal financial summary during their meeting at the Franklin Hotel. According to her attorney, he did not hand her the document. He opened it on a tablet. He described the $4.8 million figure as, where the administration really starts getting uncomfortable. Marissa claimed she told him she should not be seeing non-public negotiating information. Gavin allegedly replied, "You're advising us. You need to understand the room." That phrase sounded exactly like him. Not corruption. Not in his mind. Access. Context. Efficiency. The same language he had used to justify everything else. Then came the part that changed the case. Marissa admitted she took a photograph of the screen. Without Gavin's permission, she claimed. The photograph still existed in an automatic cloud backup. Metadata placed it at the Franklin Hotel at 9:43 p.m. The screen displayed the city's internal Riverside financial model. Revision number visible. Maximum contingency reserve visible. $4.8 million. The next morning, Vail Strategy submitted its contract amendment recommendations. Not a bid for the entire development, but recommendations that assumed the city had more financial flexibility than publicly disclosed. Could the leaked number have influenced Vail's work? Obviously. Could investigators prove how much? Different question. Could Gavin still say Marissa learned the number through industry gossip? Not convincingly. Colin sat across from me. That's why he offered Elena the statement. He knew this was coming. Probably. If she signed, what would it accomplish? Politically? Separate her from the leak. She is separate from the leak. Maybe. I looked at him. What does that mean? Did she know Gavin had confidential information? Of course. He was chief advisor. Did she know he was still seeing Marissa? She says no. Did she know they had dated? Yes. Did she require recusal? No. That is going to become the question. Not whether Elena handed Marissa the number. Whether Elena ignored a conflict that made the disclosure possible. Different kind of responsibility. Still hers. At 2:05, Elena held another press conference. No communications director beside her this time. Lydia had taken voluntary administrative leave pending review. No Gavin. No city slogan on the backdrop. Just the seal. Elena walked to the lectern carrying one page. I learned today that Marissa Vale has stated she received confidential Riverside financial information from Gavin Rusk. Cameras clicked. I had no prior knowledge that Mr. Rusk disclosed that information. Then, I did know Mr. Rusk and Ms. Vale had previously been in a personal relationship. No euphemism. No carefully selected, I cannot confirm. I should have required a formal conflict review and recusal when I learned of that relationship. Pause. I did not. There it was. Then she did something politically dangerous. She announced the city would reopen every Riverside decision in which Gavin had participated after the date she first learned he and Marissa were involved. Not just the final contract amendment. Every decision. That meant delays. Legal expense. Potential renegotiation. Possibly millions. A reporter asked, "Mayor, are you willing to risk the entire Riverside project?" Elena answered, "If the project can survive only by refusing to examine how decisions were made, then we do not know whether it deserves to survive." I stared at the screen. That was the woman I married. Or at least a version of her I had not seen in years. Then the next question destroyed the moment. "Why didn't you apply that principle before asking your husband to falsely confess to an affair?" Elena stopped. For 3 seconds, she had no answer. Then, "Because I was afraid." Silence. Of losing Riverside? Yes. Of losing your Senate future? Yes. Of losing Mr. Rusk? Another pause. Yes. That answer surprised everyone. The reporter followed. "Why him?" Elena looked toward the empty space beside the podium where Gavin used to stand. "Because he had been beside me for every political success I'd had in the last 7 years. That was brutally honest. And at some point, I stopped separating loyalty to him from loyalty to the work." I leaned back. There it was. Not an affair. Not secret romance. Dependence. Gavin had become part of Elena's political nervous system. She trusted his instincts because those instincts had helped make her mayor. Then because he helped her win re-election. Then because he built Riverside support. Eventually, questioning Gavin felt like questioning the machinery that made her successful. A journalist asked, "Do you believe Mr. Rusk manipulated you?" Elena shook her head. "No. That answer mattered. He advised me. I decided. No escape. I was the mayor." The clip went everywhere. Strangely, it produced 2 completely opposite reactions. Half the city thought Elena had finally taken responsibility. The other half thought she had just admitted she could not control her own office. Both were fair. By evening, a citizen group filed notice to begin a recall petition. Fairmont's charter allowed voters to initiate a recall process after the mayor had served the required portion of her term. They needed thousands of valid signatures. Then an election. Not immediate removal. Not council magic. A campaign. Elena's career would now be decided by voters if the petition qualified. That was a much more dangerous arena for her than an ethics hearing. Because facts would matter. But so would emotion. The fake affair. Gavin. Riverside. My marriage. Every photograph. Every clip. Every lie she had nearly asked me to tell would become campaign material. At 7:30 that night, Elena came to the hotel. I had not invited her. But she did not come upstairs. She texted, "I'm in the lobby. If you don't want to talk, I'll leave." That mattered. I went down. She was sitting alone near the windows. No staff. No security detail beyond the plainclothes officer at the entrance required by city policy. I sat opposite her. "You look terrible." "Thank you." Political strategy? Apparently voters value authenticity. "Then you're winning." She smiled weakly. Then, Gavin's lawyer called mine. "Another deal?" "Yes." "What now?" "He says Gavin has messages that make me look worse." "Do they?" "I don't know." "What does he want?" For me to say publicly that I approved him sharing general financial parameters with outside advisors. I stared. Did you? No. Then this meeting is over. She almost laughed. I already said no. Good. What's he threatening? To show I told him to do whatever it takes to keep Riverside on schedule. That sounds bad. It is bad. Context? A council whip count. When? 2 months ago. What exactly did you mean? Get votes. Legally? Obviously. Did you write legally? No. Then it'll look terrible. Yes. Still not a reason to lie now. I know. She looked at me for a long time. Then asked. Do you want me recalled? No. That surprised her. You don't? I want voters to have the real record. What if the real record removes me? Then it removes you. She looked down. What if I survive? Then you survive. You really can separate it like that? No. I leaned back. I'm still furious. I know. I still wake up thinking about that confession. She nodded. I still can't understand how you got all the way to printing it. I know. But recall isn't my revenge. Her eyes filled. That was apparently harder to hear than if I had said yes. Then, are you filing for divorce? There it was. Not mayor. Not advisor. Us. I looked out at the hotel entrance. I've met with Colin about it. Her face changed. So yes. I haven't filed. Why? I wanted the city crisis separated from our marriage before I made the decision. She laughed bitterly. Very forensic of you. It's what I know. Then she said. Don't stay married to me because a divorce would look bad during recall. I won't. Don't leave me because it would look good either. I won't. I mean it. So do I. She wiped her eyes. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Did not answer. Who? Gavin. Still contacting you? Through a new number. That sounds smart. It isn't. She showed me the message. You know they will make Thomas the hero and you the villain. I can still stop that if you stop feeding them. I handed the phone back. What does that mean? I think he wants me to stop cooperating. Will you? No. Then forward it to council. She did. Right there. No secret negotiation. No reply. Just forwarded. Then blocked the number. At 9:16, while we were still sitting in the hotel lobby, the district attorney's office announced Gavin Rusk had been asked to surrender his city devices and would be interviewed the following week regarding possible unauthorized disclosure of confidential municipal information. No charges. Not yet. The same statement emphasized. No determination of criminal wrongdoing has been made. Good. Facts first. The next morning brought a stranger development. The private developer leading Riverside announced it was invoking a contract clause allowing it to pause negotiations while the city reviewed integrity concerns. For 3 years, Elena had told everyone Riverside could not wait. Now Riverside itself stopped. Gavin's entire 48-hour strategy had been designed to push the vote through before the scandal froze the deal. My fake confession was supposed to buy those hours. Instead, my message to Miriam had made the city stop long enough to discover why Gavin needed them. That was the real reversal. Not that I sent one magical text and ended Elena's career. I sent one message that removed the distraction. After that, everyone had to look directly at the transaction she and Gavin had been desperate to finish. And the more they looked, the less the 48 hours resembled political urgency. They began to look like a closing window. The recall organizers gathered 3,200 signatures in their first weekend. They needed more than 6,000 valid ones to force an election. Elena's campaign team wanted to attack them immediately. Call them partisan. Tie them to Riverside opponents. Challenge signatures. Flood local media with supporters. Elena refused. Her new campaign manager asked, "Then how exactly do you plan to survive?" She answered, "I'm going to let them collect signatures." He thought she was joking. She wasn't. If enough people want the vote, she said, they get the vote. For the first time in her political career, Elena Calder had stopped trying to manage whether people were allowed to say no to her. And 6,000 signatures were about to tell us whether she had learned that lesson too late. The recall petition qualified 11 days later. Not barely. 8,412 signatures submitted. 7,609 verified. The charter required 6,083. That meant Fairmont would hold a recall election in 75 days. For the first time since Elena entered politics, there was no committee maneuver, media strategy, or council procedure that could decide what happened next. One question would appear on the ballot. Shall Elena Calder be recalled from the office of mayor of Fairmont? Yes. No. I stared at the sample ballot when Miriam sent it to me. After weeks of lawyers, contract records, ethics language, procurement questions, and political analysis, Elena's career had been reduced to one binary choice. She called me that evening. It's official. I saw. My campaign manager wants to start ads tomorrow. That seems normal. He wants one with you. I laughed. No. I already told him no. That stopped me. You did? Yes. What kind of ad? She sounded embarrassed. Something about our marriage being private and opponents exploiting family pain. That's impressive. I know. Especially since your office tried to manufacture the family pain. I know. Who came up with it? Not Gavin, if that's what you're asking. I wasn't. Her laugh was short. Then. I told them you are off limits. Thank you. They think that's political malpractice. Probably. I don't care. That was new. Elena had once been willing to put my face in front of cameras to save 48 hours. Now she was voluntarily giving up the most obvious sympathy strategy available to her. Not because she suddenly stopped wanting to survive. She wanted it badly. But she had finally understood that my marriage was not campaign inventory. The recall campaign became brutal anyway. The organizers called themselves Fairmont Deserves Better. Their first advertisement showed 3 images. Gavin entering the Franklin Hotel. The Riverside financial spreadsheet. Then a photograph of the first page of my fake confession. Not my photograph. The document itself. Someone had obtained it through the city's public records process after investigators determined the draft was an official record because city staff had created and circulated it using government systems. That meant the thing Elena had wanted to keep personal became public precisely because she had involved her office. The ad ended. If Mayor Calder would invent a lie about her own husband, what would she tell you? Effective. Cruel. Not entirely unfair. Elena's campaign responded with Riverside. Jobs. Tax base. Infrastructure. Her record on public safety. Balanced budgets. Street repairs. Business recruitment. She did not mention me. She did not claim Gavin had betrayed her. She did not pretend the fake confession was a harmless draft. Instead she filmed a 60-second advertisement sitting alone in the mayor's office. I made decisions I am ashamed of, she said. I failed to disclose a conflict involving my closest advisor. I allowed fear of losing a major project to affect my judgment. And I asked my husband to participate in a false public story. Then, if you believe those failures disqualify me from continuing as mayor, you should vote to recall me. Her campaign manager nearly quit over that line. I heard because Elena told me. He said nobody tells voters how to remove them. He has a point. I know. Why leave it in? Because if I spend the next 75 days implying people are unreasonable for considering recall, I haven't learned anything. I had no answer to that. Then she added. I still plan to win. There she was. Good. Accountability did not require pretending ambition disappeared. The difference was that now she was trying to win the vote instead of designing a way around it. Meanwhile, Gavin's situation got worse. The district attorney's public integrity unit did not charge him immediately. Instead, investigators presented records to a grand jury. That process remained secret. Most of what the public knew came from motions filed later. Marissa Vale had turned over the photograph of the internal budget model. Digital forensics confirmed the image existed on her phone the night of the Franklin Hotel dinner. Gavin's personal email contained the same internal document earlier that evening. His defense was straightforward. He had not intentionally given Marissa the spreadsheet. He had shown her contextual information during a conversation about the project. She photographed it without permission. Stupid? Yes. Potential policy violation? Almost certainly. Criminal disclosure? His attorney said no. The prosecution had to prove more than carelessness. That distinction became important when the media started calling him a thief. He had not stolen city money. No evidence showed he received a kickback. No evidence showed Marissa paid him. No evidence showed Vale Strategies bribed anyone. The scandal was serious enough without inventing crimes. Then investigators found a different problem. Gavin had deleted messages. Not all of them. A specific thread with Marissa from his personal phone. He deleted it 2 hours after the Ledger first contacted him for comment. That was before the city's formal preservation notice. His attorney argued he routinely deleted personal conversations. Possible. Then cloud records showed he had deleted only one conversation that day. Marissa's. Now intent became harder to explain. Even that did not automatically mean obstruction. Timing mattered. Whether he reasonably anticipated an official investigation mattered. What the messages contained mattered. But politically, the effect was devastating. Elena's campaign immediately faced another question. Had she known Gavin deleted anything? No. Could she prove she had not? Only through records. Her devices showed no discussion of deletion. Her communications with Gavin after the reporter's first inquiry were preserved. There were no instructions to destroy anything. That helped. Then something unexpected happened. Gavin asked to meet me. Through lawyers. I refused. His attorney asked again. I refused again. Then Colin called. You may want to hear this. What? Gavin says he has information about the fake confession that affects Elena's account. What information? He claims the idea wasn't originally his. I stopped. Lydia said it was. Gavin says Lydia is protecting Elena. Does he have proof? He says yes. That changed the equation. I agreed to one meeting. Lawyers present. Conference room. No private conversation. Gavin arrived wearing a gray suit without a tie. He had lost weight. For years, he had looked like the person in every room who already knew how the next hour would go. Now he looked like a man who had discovered there were rooms he could not manage. He sat across from me. Thomas. Gavin. His lawyer placed a folder on the table. Colin did not touch it. Gavin began. I owe you an apology. Probably. I should never have supported using you. Supported? He flinched. I suggested the affair angle. So Lydia was right. Yes. Then what affects Elena's account? The affair angle was mine. He looked down. The idea of using your marriage was hers. Silence. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Explain. 3 days before the story broke, Elena and Gavin had discussed possible press attacks around his relationship with Marissa. According to Gavin, Elena said, if this becomes about sex, we can survive it. If it becomes about contracting, we may not. That sounded like Elena. Not proof. Then she apparently said, the press already thinks Thomas and I are separated. If something personal breaks at home at the same time, maybe they chase that instead. I stared at him. You expect me to believe my wife volunteered me before you did? No. I expect you to read the message. His attorney slid a printed screenshot forward. Colin examined it first. Then handed it to me. A private signal conversation between Elena and Gavin. 3 days before the confession. Elena. They keep asking why Thomas hasn't been at events. If we need an unrelated personal story, that is the obvious opening. Gavin. Don't create a marriage problem unless we absolutely need one. Elena. I'm not saying create. I'm saying use what they already suspect. My stomach turned. Then, the next line. Gavin. If the Rusk/Vale story goes contract side, suspicion won't be enough. We'd need something concrete enough to take oxygen. Elena. Then figure out what concrete looks like. I put the paper down. For weeks, Elena had told me Gavin proposed the fake affair. That was technically true. He proposed the specific confession. But she had opened the door. She had offered our marriage as the battlefield before Gavin chose the weapon. Why are you giving me this now? I asked. Gavin's face hardened. Because Elena is running as though she was dragged into my strategy. She admitted she made the decision. After I suggested it. She did. That's not the whole truth. No. He leaned forward. She knew exactly what she was doing. Did you? His face tightened. Yes. Then don't make this righteous. I'm not. You tried to use me too. Yes. You ran engagement projections on my fake affair. Yes. You wanted enough distraction to reach the Riverside vote. Yes. And now you're angry because Elena is politically surviving better than you. His lawyer shifted. Gavin did not. Finally. Yes. That honesty surprised me. Then he said. But the message is still real. It was. That was the problem with compromised witnesses. Their motives can be ugly and their evidence can still be genuine. I asked, "Does outside counsel have this?" "Yes." "City attorney?" "Yes." "Recall campaign?" "No." "Media?" "Not yet." "Then why show me?" He looked directly at me. "Because she will tell you she was pressured into this." "She hasn't." "She will." "You don't know my wife as well as you think." For the first time, something like shame crossed his face. Maybe neither of us did. I left. Not angry at Gavin. Not mostly. Angry at Elena. Because there is a difference between accepting responsibility publicly and telling the person you hurt the complete truth privately. She had done the first. Not the second. I called her from Colin's office. "Did you suggest using our marriage before Gavin suggested the affair?" Silence. That was enough. "Elena." "Yes." One word. I closed my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought I had." "No. I told you I agreed to the strategy. That is not the same as telling me you offered us up before he invented the confession." "No." "Did you say the press suspicion about our separation was an opening?" "Yes." "Did you tell him to figure out what concrete looked like?" "Yes." I stood and walked toward the window. "Jesus Christ. I'm sorry." "Stop." She did. That was new too. No immediate defense. I continued. "Did you lie to investigators?" "No." "Did they ask?" "Yes." "And?" "I gave them the messages." "Good. So you were willing for lawyers to know?" "Yes. But not me." Silence. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because I knew that was the part you might not forgive." There it was. Not politics. Fear. The same thing she had blamed for the original decision. Fear of losing the office. Now fear of losing me. Different stakes. Same instinct. Manage the information until the outcome feels safer. I laughed without humor. "You still don't get it." "I know." "No, Elena." My voice rose for the first time in weeks. "You don't get to decide which facts I can handle based on which answer you want from me." She started crying. "I know. You did it with the confession." "Yes." "You did it with Gavin's relationship." "Yes." "And now you did it again with me." "Yes." I stopped. Because she was not fighting. That somehow made the anger cleaner. "You keep telling the city to judge the full record." "I know. But you gave your husband the edited version." Long silence. Then. "Yes." That was when I finally knew what I was going to do about our marriage. Not because Gavin showed me a message. Not because of the recall. Not because Elena might lose office. Because even while learning to stop managing voters, staff, and public records, she had still tried to manage my access to the truth. I told her. "I'm filing for divorce." She did not beg. Not then. Her breathing broke once. Then again. Finally. "Okay." That word hurt more than any argument. "I'll have Colin send papers." "Okay." "Elena." "Yes?" "I'm not leaking the message." She started crying harder. "Why not?" "Because my divorce is not recall material." Silence. Then. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." I ended the call. The next morning, outside counsel released an interim report. Not because of Gavin's threat. Because the signal messages were already evidence. The report concluded that Elena had personally introduced the idea of exploiting existing speculation about her marriage as a possible diversion before Gavin developed the falsifier proposal. It also concluded that she later authorized city communications employees to draft the false statement after being told its purpose was to divert media attention until the Riverside vote. The report did not find evidence Elena knew Gavin disclosed the $4.8 million figure. It did not find she ordered records destroyed. It did not find she personally benefited financially. It did find that she failed to manage Gavin's known conflict and misused public staff for a deceptive political communication tied to an official policy objective. That was enough. Within 6 hours, the last major civic organization still backing Elena in the recall withdrew its endorsement. Her own campaign manager resigned. 2 council allies publicly announced they would vote yes on recall. The election was still 4 weeks away. Elena remained mayor. But for the first time, she had no professional apparatus telling her how to survive. No Gavin. No Lydia. No major donor coalition. No Senate future. Barely a campaign. That evening, she held a press conference alone. A reporter asked whether she intended to resign instead of forcing the city through a recall election. Elena looked tired. Then said, "No." A murmur ran through the room. She continued. "The petitioners did the work required by law. Voters are entitled to the election they requested. Then, I spent too much of my career trying to manage the conditions under which people judged me." She looked directly into the cameras. "I will not manage this one." No advertisements followed. No attack mailers. No opposition research. For the final 4 weeks, Elena continued governing. Budget meetings. Storm drain repairs. Police staffing. Snow removal contracts. Ordinary mayor work. She attended recall forums and answered questions. Sometimes well. Sometimes badly. But she stopped trying to change the subject. And on election night, the same city that had elected her twice would finally answer the one question Gavin had spent his career helping her avoid. Not whether she could win a news cycle. Whether, after seeing the whole record, Fairmont still wanted her to lead. Elena lost the recall by 1,184 votes. Not a landslide. Not a humiliation. Just enough. Fairmont had 43,000 registered voters. 29,706 cast ballots. 15,445 voted to remove her. 14,261 voted to keep her. At 8:47 p.m., the local station called it. I was not at Elena's watch party. There barely was one. A conference room above a downtown restaurant. Family. A few longtime supporters. Miriam Sloan did not attend. Neither did most of Elena's former political allies. I watched from Colin Price's office because we had spent the evening finalizing the first round of divorce disclosures. That was more important to me. At 8:49, Elena texted. "It's over." I looked at the message. Then another appeared. "Don't answer if you don't want to. I just wanted you to hear it from me." I replied. "I'm sorry." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then. "You don't have to be." I thought about that. Maybe I didn't. But I was. Not sorry the voters had a choice. Not sorry they used it. Sorry that the woman I once watched win her first council race by 42 votes had reached the end of her political career sitting in a rented banquet room with half the chairs empty. Those things could coexist. The city charter gave Elena 10 days to transfer authority. Miriam Sloan, as council president, would become acting mayor until a special election. The next morning, Elena walked into City Hall before 7. No cameras yet. No staff line. No dramatic farewell. She started transition memos. Snow removal contracts. Police hiring approvals. Riverside litigation status. Open labor negotiations. Stormwater bond deadlines. The boring machinery of government did not care that the mayor had just lost her job. Someone still had to hand it over. At 10, reporters gathered outside. Elena stepped to the podium. No campaign signs. No supporters behind her. She spoke for 6 minutes. "I accept the result." That was her first sentence. No allegations. No recount demand. No claims voters had been misled. She continued. "The recall was lawful, the vote was clear, and my term will end under the charter." Then she thanked city employees, council members, residents, even the petition organizers. That last part surprised people. Then, "I asked voters to judge the full record. They did." A reporter shouted. "Do you believe the city made the wrong choice?" Elena paused. "I believe I could still have served effectively." That was honest. Then. "But public office does not belong to the person holding it." Another reporter. "Will you run again?" The question hit harder than the recall result. Elena looked down. For 15 years, every defeat had been temporary. Lose a committee vote? Build another coalition. Lose a donor? Find 2 more. Lose a story? Create a better one. Politics trained her to think every ending was just positioning for the next campaign. This time she said, "No." The room went quiet. No mayoral comeback? No. State Senate? No. Any elected office? Elena looked toward the seal on the podium. No. That was when the title became true. The message I sent Miriam had not legally removed my wife. Voters did that months later. But that message preserved the draft that connected Elena directly to a deception she could not explain as staff improvisation. Once that record existed outside her control, the political future she had built around trust started collapsing. Now she was closing the door herself. A reporter asked, "Why rule out politics permanently?" Elena answered, "Because I no longer trust my reasons for wanting the next office." That sentence made statewide news. It also made me put down my coffee. She continued, "I used to believe ambition was justified if I believed I could do good with the power that came after it." Pause. I learned that wanting to do good does not make every method used to keep power acceptable. No tears. No performance. Just tired truth. Then she walked back into City Hall and went to work. The Riverside investigation reached its own turning point 3 days later. Gavin was charged. Not with bribery. Not with theft. One felony count related to unlawful disclosure of confidential municipal information. One count related to destruction of evidence. His attorney immediately entered not guilty pleas. That mattered. A charge was not conviction. The first count rested on whether prosecutors could prove he knowingly gave Marissa restricted negotiating information without lawful purpose. The second rested on the deleted signal thread and whether deletion occurred after he reasonably anticipated an official inquiry. Both would require evidence. Marissa received no criminal charge at that stage. Vail Strategies was suspended from new city work pending contract review. The firm later agreed to terminate the Riverside engagement and repay a portion of disputed fees without admitting fraud. Messy. Real. Nothing like the clean corruption story the public wanted. Then Riverside itself survived. That surprised almost everyone. The outside procurement review concluded that while Gavin's disclosure compromised part of the negotiation process, most of the development agreement had been independently supported. The city rebid the consultant work, reopened the contingency negotiation, reduced the reserve, added independent monitoring. The private developer accepted revised terms. 6 months late, the project moved forward. Without Gavin. Without Elena. That outcome destroyed one of her last private defenses. For months, she had believed saving Riverside required saving Gavin long enough to force the vote. It didn't. The project could survive scrutiny. What could not survive was the way she had tried to avoid it. Our divorce moved forward in parallel. No children. No custody. No fight over a business empire. The difficult part was the house. We had bought it before Elena became mayor. Red brick. 2-story. Small backyard. The first place either of us owned. She wanted me to keep it. I wanted to sell. Why? She asked during mediation. Because I don't want to live inside campaign history. That sounds dramatic. It is. Every room had political residue. Volunteer meetings in the dining room. Donor calls from the study. Victory night champagne stains near the kitchen island. And, of course, the confession. Same island. Same place where 3 printed pages had been waiting for me. Elena looked down. I understand. We sold it. No argument. That hurt more than I expected. A young couple bought it. 2 teachers. First home. When I signed the closing documents, I hoped they never knew what had happened on that kitchen counter. The divorce became final 5 months after the recall. Elena did not ask me to reconsider. That mattered. She had apologized. Explained. Admitted more than once that she had used our marriage as political material. But she did not turn her improvement into leverage. Outside the courthouse, we stood under the same cold wind that seemed permanently attached to Fairmont government buildings. She wore a camel coat. No security. No staff. No mayoral SUV. You look different, I said. Poorer? I laughed. Less scheduled. That too. What are you doing now? Nothing impressive. That sounds terrifying for you. It is. She smiled. Then told me she had accepted a temporary teaching position at the University of Wisconsin Extension School. One seminar. Public administration. Not ethics. That would have been too neat. Municipal budgeting. Budgeting? Yes. You hate budgets. I hate people pretending budgets are boring. That's not the same. No. She had also joined a nonprofit board focused on local housing. Unpaid. No campaign value. No cameras. I looked at her. You're really done. With elections? Yes. I think so. That sounds less certain than the press conference. She shrugged. The press conference answer was what I needed to say then. I raised an eyebrow. Still managing? She caught herself. Then laughed. Okay. Fair. There was the old habit. Not gone. Visible. I don't plan to run again, she said. But I've learned not to turn current intention into prophecy. Better. Then she asked. Are you seeing anyone? No. You? No. We stood there. No romance. No possibility humming underneath. Just two people who used to know each other better than anyone. Then she said, do you know what hurt most about losing? The Senate? No. The recall? No. What? That the city kept functioning. I stared at her. She laughed sadly. I know how that sounds. Very mayor-like. I spent years believing every crisis proved I was necessary. She looked toward City Hall. Miriam took over. The snow got plowed. Council passed the budget. Police still showed up. Riverside survived. She nodded. The city did not collapse because Elena Calder left. No city should. I know that now. That was probably the most important political lesson she ever learned. Power tells you that your judgment is uniquely necessary. Institutions survive by proving it isn't. Before we separated, Elena had asked me to sacrifice my name because she believed too much depended on her remaining strong for 48 more hours. The city eventually showed her the opposite. Good systems survive embarrassment. Review. Leadership change. Delay. Even failure. What nearly broke Fairmont was not the truth coming out. It was people trying to keep truth from slowing them down. We signed the final papers. Then Elena held out the key ring to the old house. The sale had not closed yet. One left. I looked at it. You keep it. I don't want it. Neither do I. We both laughed. Finally I took it. Dropped it into the closing envelope. That was our marriage. Not the political version. Not the press version. Just one final key nobody wanted. 2 weeks later, Gavin's case produced the first major break. His attorney announced a plea agreement. He would plead guilty to a misdemeanor offense involving improper handling of confidential municipal information. The evidence destruction charge would be dismissed. No prison. Probation. Fine. Community service. Permanent restriction from city employment for a period established by the agreement. The felony disclosure charge was reduced because prosecutors could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that he intended to financially benefit Vale. Marissa's unauthorized photograph complicated intent. Again, reality refused to become a clean villain story. Gavin made a statement outside court. He admitted showing Marissa the internal model. Admitted deleting personal messages after the reporter contacted him. Denied ever accepting money. Then he said something that surprised me. Mayor Calder did not instruct me to disclose the document. Good. He could have dragged her further. He didn't. Then. She trusted my judgment when she should not have. That was fair too. A reporter shouted. Did you manipulate her? Gavin stopped. Looked at the cameras. Then said. I advised her aggressively. Pause. She made her own decisions. That was probably the final useful truth he gave anyone. No seduction narrative. No mastermind. No helpless mayor. Two ambitious people reinforcing each other until bad judgment started sounding strategic. That was what happened. Elena called me that night. Did you see? Yes. He didn't blame me. No. I thought he would. Maybe he finally got tired. Maybe. Then silence. I expected another apology. She didn't give one. Instead, I'm glad Riverside survived. So am I. I thought everything would fall apart if we stopped. It didn't. No. She breathed out. That's the part one can't stop thinking about. I understood. The lie had been built around urgency. 48 hours. One vote. One story. One project. One career. Everything supposedly too fragile to survive delay. Then delay happened. Review happened. Recall happened. And the city kept going. The only things that truly could not survive scrutiny were the relationships built on avoiding it. Gavin and Elena. Elena and me. Elena and the political future she had constructed around the idea that every crisis could be managed if she stayed in control long enough. By the end of that year, Fairmont elected a new mayor. Miriam did not run. A former school superintendent won instead. Elena attended the inauguration. Sat in the third row. No introduction. No speech. When the new mayor took the oath, Elena stood with everyone else. Then applauded. Someone caught the moment on camera. The photograph ran in the Ledger the next morning. No dramatic caption. Just, former Mayor Elena Calder attends inauguration of successor. For once, she was not the story. And I think that was when her political career truly ended. Not on recall night. Not when donors abandoned her. Not when I sent one message. When she sat quietly in a room, watched someone else receive the power she once thought she had to protect at any cost. And did nothing to take the attention back. A year after Elena lost the recall, Fairmont sent her an invoice. 11 hours and 20 minutes. That was the part of the scandal nobody had expected to matter. Not Gavin's hotel dinner. Not the $4.8 million number. Not my fake confession. 11 hours and 20 minutes of city employee time. The state ethics review had taken longer than the recall, the divorce, and Gavin's plea combined. By the time it finished, most people in Fairmont had moved on. Riverside construction had begun. A new mayor occupied Elena's office. Gavin was working for a private consulting firm in Illinois. Marissa Vale had left public affairs work. And Elena was teaching municipal budgeting to 23 graduate students who apparently enjoyed asking their former mayor uncomfortable questions. Then the Wisconsin Government Accountability Office issued its administrative findings. The report did not accuse Elena of stealing money. It did not accuse her of bribery. It did not say city employees were her personal campaign staff all the time. It examined one narrow question. Had public resources been used for political communication that primarily benefited Elena personally rather than serving a legitimate city purpose? The answer was yes. Lydia Fenn and 2 communications employees had spent 11 hours and 20 minutes discussing, drafting, revising, and preparing media strategy around my non-existent affair. Not continuously. Across one afternoon and evening. Some of the work overlapped with legitimate crisis communications concerning Gavin and Riverside. The reviewers separated what they could. The false marital statement portion came to 11 hours and 20 minutes. The dollar value was almost insulting. A little over $700 in staff compensation and benefits. Elena had lost a Senate future, the mayor's office, her marriage, and most of her political network. Now the state wanted $742.18 reimbursed to the city. When she called me, she was laughing. Actually laughing. I got the bill. What bill? For ruining my career. Seems low. $742.18. Can you negotiate? I'm thinking payment plan. 20 years? 30. I smiled. It was the first time the scandal sounded small enough to joke about. Then she became serious. There's also a civil penalty. How much? $5,000. That sounds less funny. I can afford it. What was the finding? She read the operative language. The agency concluded she had knowingly allowed city communications personnel to develop materially false personal messaging because the messaging was intended to influence public reaction to an official controversy and preserve support for an upcoming governmental vote. No finding of financial corruption. No finding that she ordered Gavin to leak Riverside information. No finding that she destroyed records. No criminal referral against her. One civil ethics violation. Reimbursement. Fine. Public finding. That would be the final legal consequence. You appealing? I asked. No. Why? I could argue some of the staff time was legitimate crisis work. That sounds plausible. It is. So? She paused. I don't want to spend $20,000 proving the city should get $400 instead of $700. That may be the healthiest financial decision you've ever made. Tell my budgeting class. Then. And the finding is basically right. That mattered more. A week later, Elena mailed the check. Not ceremonially. No press conference. No social media statement. The city clerk processed it with the same system used for permit fees and delinquent utility accounts. That somehow felt perfect. Public corruption stories often end with giant numbers. Suitcases of cash. Secret accounts. Federal raids. Ours ended with the former mayor reimbursing 11 hours of staff time because 3 public employees had been asked to help write a lie about her husband. The amount was small. The principle was not. Then the city council did something I had not expected. It proposed new communications rules. Not because Elena had asked. Not because reform would help her image. Because outside counsel's report identified a gap. Fairmont had rules separating campaign activity from city work. Those were clear. What it did not have was a good standard for political crisis communications that involved both official policy and a public official's private life. The fake confession had sat in that gray area. So the council created one. If city communications staff were asked to prepare personal or campaign-oriented messaging connected to an official controversy, the city attorney's office had to determine whether the work served a legitimate governmental purpose before significant staff resources were used. Nobody could turn the mayor's spouse into a crisis strategy again without someone outside the political team asking, "Why is the city paying for this?" Miriam asked me to attend the public hearing. I declined. Then she asked for a written statement. That I agreed to. Not about Elena. About the system. I kept it short. The problem was not that city employees discussed the mayor's family during a public crisis. Sometimes personal facts are relevant to public communication. The problem was that government employees were asked to knowingly construct a false personal narrative because officials believed it might produce a more favorable political environment for an upcoming city vote. Then, any safeguard should focus less on whether a communication is labeled personal or official, and more on what public purpose is actually being served. That was it. No marriage story. No affair details. No Gavin. Miriam read the statement into the record. Then Elena stood during public comment. I watched the live stream later. She was no longer mayor. No special seat. No microphone automatically waiting for her. She stood in line like everyone else. When her turn came, she gave her name and address for the record. That alone looked strange. Former Mayor Elena Calder reduced to 3 minutes at public comment. She began. I support the proposed policy. Then she did something very Elena. She criticized it. Not defensively. Technically. The draft is too broad in one place. Council members looked up. If every personal fact involving an elected official requires legal review before communications staff may answer questions, you will paralyze legitimate crisis communication. Miriam almost smiled. Elena continued. The policy should trigger review when staff are asked to create, materially alter, or strategically deploy personal information, not merely respond to accurate questions. That was a good distinction. The city attorney agreed. The amendment was adopted. Then Miriam asked, Ms. Calder, do you believe this policy would have stopped what happened in your office? Elena thought. It would have slowed us down. Pause. That probably would have been enough. There it was again. Urgency. The thing that had driven the whole disaster. 48 hours. Get through the vote. Get ahead of the story. Keep the coalition together. Elena had treated delay like failure. Now she understood that sometimes delay is a safeguard. A citizen in the gallery raised his hand during the later comment period. Older man. Retired electrician. I did not know him. He said. I still don't understand why the mayor thought her husband would agree. The room shifted. Miriam reminded him the hearing concerned policy, not private marriage. Elena could have left it there. Instead she asked for 30 seconds. Miriam allowed it. Elena returned to the microphone. Because I thought he was the safest person to ask. That surprised me. The man frowned. What does that mean? Elena looked toward the council. Then back at him. I knew city employees could refuse something improper. I knew council members could challenge me. I knew reporters would publish what they found. Then, I believed my husband would absorb the cost because he loved me. The room went silent. That was the first time she had ever described it that way. Not as political panic. Not as Gavin's strategy. Not even as fear. Safety. I had been the safe person to harm. She continued. That assumption was part of why the request became possible. The citizen asked. So you thought he was weak? No. Her answer came immediately. I thought he was loyal. That hurt more. Because it was true. She had mistaken loyalty for unlimited capacity. Marriage for a reserve fund. Something you could withdraw from during crisis and replenish later. The fake confession had been a political bridge loan backed by my reputation. She assumed I would cover it because that was what spouses did. I closed the live stream. I did not need the rest. 2 weeks later, Elena called me. Did you hear the hearing? Some. Which part? The safe person. Silence. Then. I should have understood that earlier. Yes. I used to tell people politics shows you who your real friends are. I remember. That's a terrible framework. Sometimes. I started measuring loyalty by what people were willing to absorb for me. That was exactly it. Gavin absorbed risk. Staff absorbed unreasonable deadlines. Council allies absorbed bad headlines. I was supposed to absorb adultery. And Elena called all of it loyalty. What do you call it now? I asked. She thought. Debt I had no right to create. That was good. Then she changed the subject. I got offered a job. What kind? A national public affairs firm. I laughed. You cannot be serious. I had the same reaction. Doing what? Crisis strategy. That is almost offensive. They pay extremely well. Of course they do. Washington. Of course. You think I should take it? No idea. Old Thomas would have an opinion. Old Elena would already know which answer she wanted. She laughed. Fair. Then I asked. Do you want it? I want to be wanted for it. That was an honest answer. And the work? I'm not sure. Then there's your problem. She declined. Instead, she expanded her teaching load and accepted a paid role helping small Wisconsin municipalities build multi-year capital budgets. Nothing glamorous. Water systems. Fire stations. Road replacement. Debt schedules. The kind of government work that rarely appears in campaign advertisements because nobody cheers for responsible depreciation assumptions. She loved it. That surprised both of us. You know what's weird, she told me 6 months later. What? If I help a town avoid a budget crisis 10 years from now, nobody knows I did it. That sounds painful. It was. And now? Now I think invisible success might be healthier. I smiled. That was probably as far from Gavin Rusk as she could travel. He had lived by visibility. Narrative. Timing. Win the next 48 hours. Elena was learning to work on decisions whose success might not be obvious for a decade. Our contact became less frequent after that. No fight. No deliberate cutoff. Just life. I started seeing someone named Rebecca Lane. She worked in commercial insurance. We met because she challenged one of my loss estimates during a fraud investigation and was irritatingly correct. I did not tell Elena immediately. Not because I was hiding it. Because divorced people do not owe each other dating reports. Months later, Elena asked during a phone call. Someone told me you've been seeing Rebecca Lane. Apparently Fairmont remains a village. So it's true? Yes. Serious? Maybe. Silence. Then. Good. Not dramatic. Not jealous. Just good. That was all I wanted from her. Gavin's probation ended the following year. He left the Midwest. I never heard from him again. Lydia Fenn moved into nonprofit communications. She sent me a Christmas card once. No apology. She had already given that. Just a photograph of her family and a note. I now ask, is it true? Before, will it work? Still annoys everyone. I kept that card. Fairmont's new communications rule became known informally as the Calder Rule. Elena hated the name. I am not getting a rule named after me. You already did. It sounds like I sponsored it. You inspired it. That is worse. It usually is. The official policy had a boring title nobody remembered. The nickname stayed. Years later, a local journalist called me for a retrospective on the recall. I declined an interview. He asked one final question before hanging up. Do you realize your message to Miriam changed the city? I looked at the original screenshot still archived in my legal files. Read exactly. Do not improvise. One photograph. One message. A preservation request. No, I said. It changed what people were able to see. That was more accurate. The city changed itself afterward. Elena lost the election because voters made a choice. Gavin lost his position because evidence showed what he had done. The city rewrote policy because the old one had failed. My marriage ended because trust had been spent in ways no vote could restore. One message had not done all that. It had simply stopped everyone from rewriting the first night before anyone else could read it. And sometimes preserving the original version is enough to change everything that comes after. Riverside opened 4 years after Elena lost the recall. By then, almost nobody remembered why construction had been delayed. People remembered the scandal. They remembered Gavin. Some remembered the fake affair. But cities are good at turning political disasters into background noise once cranes show up. The old warehouses came down. The Riverwalk opened first. Then the hotel. Then the convention center. Restaurants followed. Apartments. A public plaza overlooking the water. The project Elena had once believed could not survive 48 hours of bad headlines survived nearly a year of audits, renegotiation, rebidding, lawsuits, and political turnover. Then opened anyway. That was probably the final insult to the theory that had destroyed her career. The city invited every former mayor to the opening ceremony, including Elena. She almost declined. I knew because she called me. We had not spoken in 5 months. "Are you going?" she asked. "Why would I? You were there at the beginning." "No, I was married to someone who was. That counts in politics. Only when someone needs a spouse in a photograph." She laughed. "Then. They invited me. I assumed. I don't know whether to go. Do you want to?" "I don't know." "Then don't ask me what you should do." "I wasn't." "You absolutely were." Another laugh. "Fine." Then she became serious. "If I go, people will think I'm trying to reclaim the project. Some will. If I don't, people will say I'm bitter. Some will. So there is no correct political answer." "No." She went quiet. That still bothered her. Years away from office had not completely removed the instinct to search for the option that controlled interpretation. Finally she asked, "What would a normal person do? Decide whether she wants to see the convention center. That simple?" "Yes. I hate normal people." "I know." She went. So did I. Not because of Elena. Rebecca's company had provided insurance services to one of the private contractors, and she had 2 tickets. Rebecca and I had married the previous spring. Small ceremony. 40 people. No politicians. No public statements. No one asked anyone to confess to anything. Highly successful event. Riverside's opening drew thousands. Families on the Riverwalk. Food trucks. A brass band that played too loudly. Children running through fountains city engineers had spent months arguing about. The convention center's glass facade reflected the river. I stood beside Rebecca near the back of the crowd while the new mayor thanked approximately every living person in Wisconsin. Then he introduced former officials who had contributed to the project. Elena's name came third. Applause. Not thunderous. Not hostile. Respectful. She stood from a folding chair in the front section. Waved once. Sat down. No speech. I watched her face. She was smiling. Not the camera smile. Real. Rebecca followed my eyes. "You okay?" "Yes." "You still proud of her?" The question surprised me. "About Riverside?" "About anything." I thought. "Yes." Rebecca nodded. No jealousy. No discomfort. That was one of the reasons I loved her. She never treated my history with Elena as competition. The new mayor cut the ribbon. People cheered. The plaza filled. And nothing dramatic happened. No reporter dragged Elena back to the microphone. No protesters appeared with copies of my fake confession. No last confrontation with Gavin. The project simply became part of the city. That afternoon, I ran into Elena near the river. She was alone. Holding coffee. She saw Rebecca first. "Hi." "Hi." They had met twice before. Civil. Easy. Rebecca pointed toward a vendor tent. "I'm getting something that contains an irresponsible amount of sugar." Then she looked at me. "You want anything?" "No." She walked away. Elena watched her go. "She's good for you." "Yes." No argument? "No." Disappointing. I smiled. Then looked toward the convention center. "You came. So did you. Not for the same reason." "No." She took a sip of coffee. "I thought this would hurt." "Does it?" "A little. Because you're not on stage?" She considered lying. I watched the moment. Then. "Yes." "Good. But mostly because I remember how convinced I was that none of this could happen without me." She looked toward the plaza. "It's bigger than I imagined." "The project?" "The fact that it belongs to everyone now." That sounded sentimental. But true. A little girl ran past us carrying a balloon. Behind her, her father shouted for her to slow down. Elena smiled. "I spent 3 years calling it my project." "It kind of was." "No." She shook her head. "I was mayor while it was being built politically." "That's less catchy." "Budgeting ruined me." We laughed. Then Elena said. "Miriam told me something yesterday." "What?" "The Calder rule got used." I looked at her. How? A month earlier, the new mayor's communications office had received a request from his chief of staff. A city department director was facing criticism after his brother's construction company received an emergency repair subcontract. The procurement itself was apparently lawful. Competitive waiver properly documented because of storm damage. But the optics were terrible. The chief of staff suggested the communications team emphasize a separate story involving the director's divorce and financial stress, hoping public sympathy would soften the coverage. Not a fabricated divorce. Real facts. Still personal. One communications employee stopped the process. Cited the policy. Asked city council to review whether the personal information served a legitimate public purpose. Council said no. The strategy died before a draft was written. I stared at Elena. That's almost exactly. I know. No fake affair. No. But same instinct. Yes. Change the subject by spending someone's private life. Yes. I looked toward City Hall across the river. What happened to the contract issue? They answered it directly. And? The emergency procurement was valid. That easy? Apparently. I laughed. Elena did too. All that political cleverness, she said. And they just explained the facts. Revolutionary. Terrible for consultants. She looked down at her coffee. Then. That policy did something I couldn't. What? Stopped the bad idea before somebody had to get hurt by it. That was the point. Punishment comes late. Rules matter when they make punishment unnecessary. For years, people had focused on what Elena lost. Office. Senate run. Marriage. Gavin. Reputation. But maybe the only useful measure of the scandal was whether the next person standing in that room had an easier way to say no. Not because she was braver than Lydia. Because the system backed her before the pressure began. Elena smiled faintly. I guess having a rule named after you isn't completely terrible. Careful. Growth. Don't tell anyone. We stood there for another minute. Then Rebecca returned holding something covered in caramel. Elena looked at it. What is that? A lawsuit. Accurate. Rebecca handed me a second one. You said you didn't want anything, so obviously I bought you one. Elena laughed. Then stopped. The sound changed her face. For 1 second, I could see the woman I had married 15 years earlier. Not Mayor Calder. Not recalled politician. Not the person standing over a fake confession. Just Elena. That did not make me want her back. It made me glad she had survived becoming someone I no longer recognized. There is a difference. She said goodbye. Rebecca and I walked toward the river. No grand closure. No dramatic forgiveness speech. Life had already done the closing. 2 months after Riverside opened, the Fairmont City Archives contacted me. They wanted the original paper copy of the fake confession. Apparently the public records version existed digitally, but the physical document had become part of the historical record surrounding the recall. I still had it. 3 pages. Folded inside a legal file. Sticky notes still attached. Read exactly. Do not improvise. I had not looked at it in years. The archivist asked whether I would donate it. My first instinct was no. That paper had lived in my kitchen. It had been part of my marriage before it became part of city history. Then I thought about the communications employee who had used the Calder rule. About the policy hearing. About Riverside. About how much damage came from people assuming the original version could always be managed later. I donated it. One condition. The archive could display the document. Not my private correspondence with Elena. Not divorce records. Not unrelated marriage messages. The public story ended where the public conduct began. They agreed. A year later, the City Museum included the first page in a small exhibition about major Fairmont political controversies. Not a giant display. One glass case. Beside it was the message I sent Miriam. The one people kept calling the message that ended Elena's career. Seeing it displayed made me uncomfortable. It was so ordinary. No dramatic language. No threat. No accusation that Elena was corrupt. Just. Elena's staff drafted a false statement tonight for me to confess to an affair I did not have. I will not participate. You should ask City Council tonight whether public resources were used to create it before anyone destroys or edits anything. That was all. One message. I stood there with Rebecca while 2 college students read it. One whispered. That's what got the mayor recalled. The other shook her head. No. It says the council preserved records after this. I almost smiled. Good. Someone had read carefully. That distinction mattered. My message did not end Elena Calder's career. It did not expose Gavin's photograph of the spreadsheet. It did not create his relationship with Marissa. It did not make Elena hide that relationship. It did not write the communications draft. It did not make her offer our marriage as a diversion. It did not cast one recall vote. It did one thing. It made the first version harder to erase. After that, facts accumulated. Some hurt Elena. Some cleared her. The investigation found she did not order Gavin to leak confidential information. Found no financial corruption by her. Found no destroyed records on her part. It also found she knowingly used city staff to build a deceptive political story and failed to manage a serious conflict inside her office. Voters saw both. Then chose. That was how her career ended. Not with magic. With a record. Years later, Elena and I spoke once about the museum. She had seen the exhibit. How does it feel having our worst kitchen argument behind glass? I asked. Like I should charge admission. They already do. Then royalties. I laughed. Then she said. I read your message again. Okay. I used to think the worst sentence was false statement. What is it now? Before anyone destroys or edits anything. I knew why. You thought I believed you'd delete it. Yes. Did you? I didn't know. That's worse. Yes. She was quiet. Then. You trusted the system more than you trusted me. At that moment? Yes. Another silence. That's probably when our marriage actually ended. Maybe. Not when I filed. Not at recall. Not when Gavin revealed the signal thread. Maybe it ended when I looked at my wife and decided the safest place for the truth was outside our house. I did not say that. I didn't need to. Elena continued. I used to be angry you sent it. I know. Then embarrassed. I know. Then grateful. That one still feels weird. It should. She laughed. Then. Now I mostly wish you'd never needed to. There it was. The only apology that still mattered. So do I. We hung up. That was the last time we ever discussed the fake affair. The scandal became city history. Riverside became a neighborhood. The Calder rule became a boring line in a municipal policy manual. Gavin became someone I occasionally saw mentioned in old articles. Elena became a former mayor who helped small towns understand debt schedules. Rebecca and I built a life nobody would ever put in a museum. Good. And the 3 pages Elena once believed could save 48 hours remained behind glass. A reminder of how political careers really collapse. Usually not because one enemy destroys them. Not because one message has magical power. Not because the truth suddenly becomes stronger than everything else. They collapse when too many people make small decisions based on the assumption that truth can be rearranged later. Gavin believed the contract story could wait. Lydia believed a false draft was just a draft. Elena believed our marriage could absorb one lie. And I was supposed to believe I could repair my name after the vote. Everyone wanted 48 hours. My message took those hours away. That was all. It forced the city to stop before the lie became strategy, the strategy became history, and history became whatever the people in power said had happened. Years earlier, Elena had placed 3 pages on our kitchen island and told me, read exactly. Do not improvise. In the end, I did neither. I sent one message of my own. And for the first time in Elena Calder's political career, the truth reached the room before her advisors could rewrite it. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.